It started with a letter, handwritten, unannounced, and delivered without ceremony to a man who had been mocked, sidelined, and nearly erased from Nigeria's political future. But it wasn't from a fan or a follower, it was from a sitting head of state. Inside that envelope was a message that would shake two governments and ignite a silent revolution, because when President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso called Peter Obi the blueprint for Africa's future, even France began listening. What happens when a West African president risks his alliances, his safety, and even his nation's fragile economy to defend a Nigerian opposition leader? Tune into Courageous Voices for a story that will redefine leadership. The knock came just after dawn, no fanfare, no escort, just a lone courier in a dust-stained jacket holding a thin cream-colored envelope marked with a wax seal, 3 interlocked stars of the Burkina Faso transition. He said nothing, handed it over and left. Peter Obi stood by the gate in his joggers, blinking at the early sun, the weight of the letter oddly heavy in his hand. No return address, no diplomatic markings, just his name in delicate cursive to the one they underestimated inside the air. Shifted, he closed his study door, sat down, and sliced the seal. A scent of tobacco and old parchment rose up, an almost monastic presence, as if the words inside had waited lifetimes to be read. The first line made him pause. My brother, they fear the honest man more than the corrupt one. He reread it then again. He recognized the voice not in tone but in truth. Only one man could write like this, not a Nigerian politician, not a foreign diplomat, but a soldier poet who led barefoot marches and spoke of Africa with fire in his throat. President Ibrahim Traoré. Obi leaned back in his chair, the letter trembling slightly in his hands, not from fear, from something deeper, recognition. A man in another country under sanction and surveillance had reached across borders, not for politics, but for something older, brotherhood, integrity. He read on. Outside, Lagos was waking up, cars honked, street vendors shouted, but in one corner of the city, silence reigned, because sometimes revolutions don't begin with a speech or a bullet, sometimes they begin with an envelope no one was supposed to open. What hidden power lies within these words? Stay with Courageous Voices to find out. The leak hit Rock like a slow-burning fuse, quiet at first, then blinding. It wasn't broadcast on national TV. It didn't need to be. A single screenshot of Traoré's letter to Peter Obi, blurry but unmistakable, began circulating in encrypted WhatsApp groups by mid-morning. By noon, it was everywhere from student forums to private investor threads, and by 2 p.m., it reached the president's desk. Tinubu didn't speak when he read it, he just stared at the printed pages, brow locked in a heavy frown. Across the table, his ministers traded uneasy glances. The letter wasn't just praise, it was strategy, vision, a roadmap for a different kind of Nigeria, one built on transparency, austerity, and public service. A quiet indictment of everything they had grown used to. I want to know who leaked it, Tinubu said flatly, but no one answered, because deep down they all knew this kind of letter doesn't leak because of incompetence, it leaks because someone believes it must be heard. In another wing of the compound, an advisor muttered under breath, he's turning Obi into a martyr, a symbol. The damage was deeper than political, it was generational. The youth, restless, disillusioned, angry, saw in Traoré's words a reflection of what Obi had once offered them, and now those words had come from the lips of a sitting African president untainted by corruption or colonial shadow. What terrified them most wasn't the letter's message, it was the timing. 2027 was not far, and now Peter Obi wasn't just a politician, he was becoming a prophecy whispered from one capital to another, a prophecy that no amount of silence could contain. In Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré reads the letter to his inner cabinet. My brother Peter Obi, to the one they mocked for his honesty, they laughed at you in polished halls behind gold-rimmed glasses as if restraint was weakness and humility a flaw. They measured your power not by how loud you roared but by how little you took, and so they called you soft. They mistook your silence for surrender, but I did not. They called you weak for being clean, but in you I saw discipline. I saw what they feared and African man they couldn't bribe, a man who walked past oil deals and banknotes with empty hands but full conscience, a man who made no enemies yet never bowed, that is strength, not the kind they televise, the kind they try to erase. When I watched you during the last election, I didn't see a man who lost, I saw a nation that blinked, a people caught between fear and fatigue. You were not rejected, Peter, you were delayed, and the delay, my brother, was not failure, it was preparation. Here in Burkina Faso, I have learned that power means nothing if it cannot look a child in the eye, that leadership is not how many follow you when you win, but how many remember you when you lose. And Peter, many remember you. I do not write this as a president, I write it as a brother in arms, a student of your integrity, because in this continent of orators and opportunists, you were one of the few who chose neither. They called you a dreamer, but only because you dared to dream beyond their imagination. Hold that line. A nation that nearly deserved you, that is how I see Nigeria in those fleeting days, on the edge of awakening, heart pounding, one breath away from choosing light over spectacle. They say your people were not ready, that they chose familiarity over reform, but I say they almost were. You brought them close. Closer than they had ever dared come. You walked among market stalls instead of boardrooms, you listened to women grinding pepper beneath tarpaulin shade. You didn't wear power like a crown, but carried it like a burden you were willing to share, that frightened them, Peter, because you made politics intimate again, human, measured not in contracts signed, but in mothers comforted, youths inspired, hospitals visited without cameras. You chose books over bullion vans, principles over party, and when they mocked your thriftiness, your insistence on traveling light, your refusal to turn governance into indulgence, I laughed quietly because they did not see the war you were waging, a war not of weapons but of example. You didn't fight corruption with slogans, you embarrassed it by not participating. Peter, I believe Nigeria almost chose itself through you, and almost is more dangerous than failure because it means the people saw what was possible then looked away. But I write this not to mourn what didn't happen, I write because you are still here. The work is not finished, the seed is not dead. A nearly awakened nation is not a sleeping one, it is a restless one, and restlessness when met with purpose becomes revolution. I say let the continent rise not from capitals but from character, and yours has already drawn the blueprint. Don't abandon it now, 2027 is not far. Time, Peter, is a river without remorse, it flows with or without our consent, and while others wait for perfect conditions for applause or permission, men like you must act as if history is watching, even when no one else is, because history doesn't knock twice for men like you. It doesn't ask if you're ready, it dares you to make others ready. I write this not just as a gesture of brotherhood, but as a mirror. In my country, we did not wait for institutions to fix themselves, we walked barefoot through the debris of what was broken and built anew stone by stone, oath by oath. Burkina Faso was not ready either, but we made her ready. You must do the same. Don't let them convince you that 2027 is too soon. What is time to a man whose values are already formed? What is the presidency to someone who refused to buy it? Let the loud ones chase clout and consensus. You continue preparing in silence, that's where the roots grow deep. Let them say you're unelectable, that's how they treated Sankara. That's how they treated Lumumba, and it's how they'll treat anyone who refuses to trade vision for votes. But remember, movements don't begin in polling booths, they begin in whispers. In hope passed hand to hand, you have been whispered about. Peter, now speak, let your life be louder than their lies, let your preparation outlive their propaganda. Let the continent know that not all who step back are retreating, some are loading, because when the people cry again in 2027, they will not be looking for charisma, they will be looking for character, and you will already be standing. We will not wait for permission. That is the line I chose to close this letter with because it is the one the world fears most, not war, not chaos, but a continent that decides without approval to love itself again. Africa does not need to be rescued by outsiders. We are not broken children. We are not waiting for Western grants wrapped in red tape and photo ops. We have mines, we have minerals, we have millions of restless youth who have seen their future outsourced, misnamed, sold. You and I, we will Rewrite the script not through handshakes in ivory towers, but through collaboration in the mud, the streets, the classrooms, the ballot boxes. Let them laugh, let them dismiss us as dreamers, let them say we are young or naive or untested, because what they call naivety is actually belief, and belief is contagious. Pan-Africanism is not dead, it was just waiting for co-authors. And Peter, you have the pen, I have the ink, the rest will come. Ghana is stirring, Mali is awake, Guinea has already burned its chains. Nigeria, your Nigeria, is on the verge. We are not presidents forever, we are placeholders, symbols. What matters is not how long we rule, but what we ignite while we do. So do not ask, will they let me? Ask, what happens if I don't? Because your people will look back one day, not at what you said, but at what you did when the world was watching, when the continent was trembling, when the path forward was no longer paved, but still possible. We are not waiting for the West to approve us, we are waiting for each other to believe, and I believe in you. Yours faithfully, Ibrahim Traoré. In the northern part of Nigeria, Sani Abubakar had read the letter twice before sunrise. The wax seal was broken by someone else, passed hand to hand through a chain of invisible conscience until it landed in his inbox. He wasn't a revolutionary, he didn't wear berets or quote Sankara, but something in Traoré's words struck a nerve he hadn't known was exposed. He printed 20 copies, then 40 more. He didn't speak to his wife that morning, he just packed his bag with paper and glue and walked out like it was any other Tuesday. University of Ibadan, he moved quickly, blending in, and by dusk, students found the pages on bulletin boards and cafeteria walls, stuck like quiet declarations. Each letter began with the same salutation to the one they mocked for his honesty. He knew what would come, his ID was flagged within hours. Tinubu's cabinet gathered in rage, they called it sabotage, foreign propaganda. Barked one minister, a trap. Hissed another, but the people didn't care who leaked it, they cared what it said. By midnight, the letter was no longer a secret, it was an anthem. Boys in roadside cafes argued over its meaning, girls read aloud during campus meetings. A street hawker in Kaduna yelled, Traoré said Obi is the future, and gave away roasted corn for free. The state responded fast, throttled networks, planted editorials, whispered threats, but it didn't matter. Traoré's words had left the page, they live now in voices, in pulses, in defiant eyes, and in a dim prison cell in Abuja. Sani Abubakar leaned his head against the wall and smiled, not because he was safe, but because for the first time in decades, the truth had moved faster than fear. What will this truth ignite next? Stay tuned to Courageous Voices. The next day, in a vaulted room beneath the Quai d'Orsay, a classified briefing echoes with tension. The cable-stamped urgent eyes only is read aloud in clipped French. If Traoré and Obi align ideologically, expect a Pan-African awakening we cannot control. No one in the room speaks for several seconds. The diplomat delivering the message clears his throat, then continues, they are symbols, opposites in origin, but twins in intention. Traoré is fire from below, Obi is structure from within. One inspires revolt, the other reform. Together they are dangerous, together they are legitimate. A silent panic ripples across embassies, the usual levers, funding cuts, trade delays. Media shaping might not work this time, not if the people have already decided. French companies with stakes in Nigerian oil and West African infrastructure begin making quiet calls. Lobbyists whisper to ECOWAS delegates. Terms like regional destabilization and foreign subversion start slipping into internal memos. Someone suggests a motion to censure Burkina Faso diplomatically. Another recommends freezing development loans to Nigerian states sympathetic to Obi, but the harder they push, the faster the idea spreads. In Cotonou, students march with cardboard signs reading, Africa for Africans, no permission needed. In Dar, radio hosts read lines from the leaked letter between jazz tracks. In Nairobi, a poet posts, when one speaks, it's a protest. When two speak, it's a continent. And in Abuja, Sani Abubakar watches the sky through rusted bars. Somewhere outside he hears chanting, dozens of voices rising over the prison walls. They are not calling his name, they are reciting the letter. It has become scripture, memory, fire, and as France calculates its next move with spreadsheets and sanctions, the youth of a continent are already marching with nothing but belief in a letter no one was supposed to read. Peter Obi stared at the letter again. Though he'd memorized every word, the room was quiet, but his heart wasn't. Across the polished table sat his phone, screen dim, the number already typed in, but unsent. He hesitated, not out of fear, but because something about the letter felt holy, too pure to politicize. But then he pressed the call button. In Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré answered after one ring. No security check, no diplomatic preamble, just brother. For 47 minutes, there were no aides, no cameras, no filters. Two men, one in fatigues, the other in quiet suits, spoke across borders like comrades, not candidates. They didn't talk strategies or manifestos, they talked about rice sellers in Enugu, schoolboys in Bobo de Lasso, the scent of rain before it hits African soil. Obi spoke of doubt, of betrayal by his own, of the ache of being right too early. Traoré spoke of isolation, of threats from men in suits who smile with knives, of waking up every morning to foreign pressure and domestic fear. And in that silence between two truths, one sentence slipped through, captured by a dormant microphone in Obi's office, left unintentionally active by a junior staffer. If you run, Traoré said, voice firm but not loud, I'll stand beside you. That sentence leaked within hours. No context, no transcript, just 12 words, but they were enough. By evening, they were graffitied on university walls in Port Harcourt. They played over protest speakers in Bamako. A TikTok remix set them to drums and storm footage. 12 words, one call. And in that moment, Peter Obi wasn't just a former candidate, he was a man with an army he hadn't summoned yet. Africa, it seemed, was already listening. After 3 days, a bell rang early at Unity Primary School in Enugu. The morning was ordinary, chalk dust in the air, sandals slapping pavement, a teacher straightening her scarf. But something had changed. Instead of the national pledge, a new chant rose from the children's voices, soft at first, then stronger with every word. We are not the future, we are the writers of it. No one told them to say it, it had arrived scribbled on a crumpled paper passed between classrooms the day before. They recited it like a hymn, unaware that the words were pulled from a letter between two men the world had not planned on hearing. In Bamako, a mural appears overnight. Traoré and Obi, shoulder to shoulder, painted in defiant brush strokes. In Kigali, a spoken word artist opens her set with a verse. Not all revolutions are born in fire, some begin in ink. Across Accra, school debates no longer ask, will Africa change? But when will we lead it? There are no orders, no central organizers, just momentum. Governments grow nervous, Western embassies scramble to draft new assessments. ECOWAS meets behind closed doors, but the continent has already shifted. What once felt distant and impossible now breathes in the hands of children, students, farmers, market women. In a radio interview, a young Ghanaian journalist asks, what if this isn't just politics? What if this is literature written by the living? No one answers, because some questions don't seek answers, they seek permission. And across rooftops, chalkboards, and whispered dreams, two names echo not as titles, but as symbols. Obi Traoré. Africa long spoken for is now speaking back, and its voice is young, steady, and finally unafraid. If this story moved you, if it made you question power, legacy, and what it really means to lead, don't scroll away just yet, and let me know the country you are tuning in from. Like this video to help others discover it. Drop a comment. Do you believe a letter can spark a revolution? And don't forget to subscribe, because these stories aren't fiction, they're the echoes of a continent waking up on courageous voices. Africa is writing back.